Hello, my friends. Today we'll be taking a look at the autosomal DNA results, predicted phenotype traits, and GD match results of a Copper Age individual from Armenia. This individual is male, his mitochondrial lineage is H, and his Y-DNA is L1A1. Definitely very interesting. In terms of his ethnic calculated results and where he's from, let's start with where he's from. So he lived in let's find the time period here in the 43 to 35 centuries before the Common Era. So this is definitely the Chalcolithic period. This is even before the Bronze Age, and this is where he is from in Armenia. So judging by this time period when he lived, you would not think that he has any Indo-European ancestry. He shouldn't have any Indo-European ancestry, but the ethnicity results are kind of suggesting that he does. So let's look at what he scores with Eugene's K13. Here he is scoring 36% West Asian, 28% East Mediterranean, 14% West Mediterranean, and then you start seeing percentages, and you start seeing things that he scores that are kind of unusual for somebody from this time period from Armenia. He's scoring 7.5% North Atlantic and 5.9% Baltic. This is a Northern European component. These are Northern European components that he has while being a Copper Age individual from Armenia. Does he actually have Indo-European ancestry or does he not? I find it hard to tell. I think you would need to have maybe a more robust ethnicity calculator to be able to actually tell that. Actually, let's see. We can probably try this out, but we should probably use something different. There's a good ethnicity calculator, such as, for example, Eurogene's Step K10. I think this might tell us a little bit more about whether or not he has Indo-European ancestry. Let's try this one. Meanwhile, while that is loading, let me show you what he scores with the trait predictors version of the ethnicity calculator. Let's open that, and here he is closest to Chimera mercenaries from the Caucasus, followed by KRD003, Tel Kordunyo Chalcolithic individual from Turkey, followed by BMAC, then Natufian, all the typical West Asian and Middle Eastern people is what he scores closest to with my ethnicity calculator. Let's see, is this finished? It's calculating populations. Um, we're gonna see what he scores for the Eurogene Step K10. And it is done. This is what he scores with Eurogene Step K10. So once again, here we see him scoring a lot of the Northern European components, such as 16.7% Step, 8% WHG, UHG. So he's scoring some European components, which is definitely very interesting. And his closest population is Turkish, followed by Kurds, followed by Kumyks, followed by the Iranians, followed by Georgians, Abkhazians, Armenians, Adigay, North Ossetians, and Balkars. All of these people have Indo-European ancestry, and in fact, he's getting modeled as a mixture of Kurdish plus Croatian, or Kurdish plus Bosnian, or Kurdish plus Serbian from Bosnia as the closest mixed mode oracles. So even the mixed mode oracle is detecting quite a lot of European admixture in this individual, and I'm not sure how. It definitely doesn't seem right that somebody from the Copper Age in Armenia has this kind of European ancestry. So if you have any suggestions, any theories how this Indo-European ancestry or this Northern European like genetic drift found its way um, into Armenia in the Copper Age, definitely do leave that in the comments. Let's go ahead and explore his Dasha code results and what he looks like and his traits. It looks like he's got darkest brown eyes, definitely very dark eye color. The likelihood of brown eyes for him is 32%, and anything lighter than brown is pretty much very statistically improbable. For hair color likelihood distribution, looks like he's got black hair. Likelihood of dark brown hair for him is 23.9%. Anything lighter than dark brown for hair color is very statistically improbable. For skin color likelihood distribution, looks like he's got olive or Mediterranean skin tone. Light brown is possible, white is possible, but dark brown or palest is not really possible. For hair texture, looks like he most likely has curly or wavy or straight hair. Kinky hair is maybe not so much probable, but Curly hair and wavy hair are the biggest components that he scores. These are the biggest percentages for hair textures. And for coloring related variants, it looks like he does not have blue eye haplotype 3 or blue eye haplotype 2 or blue eye haplotype 4 or even blue eye haplotype 1. So he's definitely just very dark in terms of color of eyes. If you look at his genotype in Noka Turnherk2 region, he is definitely very dark. Um, he does not have any ginger variants in MC1R. Okay. What about the biomarkers? Let's look at that. So looking at the biomarkers, it looks like he's got a slightly below average level of vitamin D, pretty typical. Slightly above average level of LDL cholesterol, which is kind of unfortunate. You want to have higher levels of LDL cholesterol. Slightly below average level of HDL cholesterol, which is once again slightly a little bit unfortunate. You want to have higher than average level of HDL cholesterol. He's got slightly above average level of glucose. Once again, kind of unfortunate, but it's all within the normal general ranges. There is no predisposition to there is no incredible predispositions here. Um, he's got slightly above average level of hemoglobin. Once again, kind of not so good. He's got a um, slightly below average blood pressure, actually, which is definitely very good to see. And he's got, it looks like, a pretty much spot on average predisposition to level of iron in the blood. So he's got an average predisposition to level of iron. Okay, that's pretty good to see. Average is usually good. And for sex hormone binding globulin, which is something I added yesterday, actually, this is a new biomarker. It looks like he's got a slightly below average predisposition for that. All right, and once again, um, it can't really go too bad. You just don't want to have a level that's too low, because then you have some problems with infertility and just awful things. Like if you're a female and you have lower levels of SHBG, you might like start growing a mustache and going into menopause at the age of 20. So this is kind of important. This is kind of an important panel right here. In his case, he's got a pretty much a typical average normal level of SHBG, so that's pretty good. Now let's look at the polygenic risk scores for certain conditions, and it looks like he's got a pretty much spot on average odds for vitiligo, slightly above average odds for myopia. He's got high odds for primary biliary cirrhosis. He's got a below average odds for stroke. He's got a above average odds for male pattern hair loss, which is not so surprising because it's very ethnically linked. If you are a European or a West Asian, which he is, you're going to have higher odds of male pattern hair loss. He's got a slightly below average odds for atrial fibrillation. He's got slightly below average odds for deep vein thrombosis. He's got slightly above average odds for bipolar type 1. He's got slightly above average odds for schizophrenia. It looks like he's got a slightly below average odds for type 2 diabetes, a high-ish odds for Alzheimer's, below average odds for multiple sclerosis. He's got 1 risk variant for breast cancer out of 12, which is pretty typical. 7 risk variants for testicular cancer out of 14, once again pretty typical. 1 risk variant for celiac disease out of 6, which is once again pretty typical. 0 risk variants for GSS out of 10. All right, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. 7 risk variants for Crohn's out of 20, which is okay, I guess. And nothing relevant was found for Riefenstein's, and for Parkinson's, it's got 2 risk variants out of 10. Pretty typical as well. So, from what we see here, is there anything that's concerning? I guess myopia is a little bit concerning. He might be a little bit predisposed to myopia. Um, Male pattern hair loss for sure is concerning because most people experience that to some extent, especially most like white people, most Middle Eastern people experience male pattern hair loss to some extent. And Alzheimer's also is a little bit concerning here because he's got an above average risk score for that, and Alzheimer's is quite a common condition. All right, now let's go through the maybe I should show you the phenotype oracle. Hold on, I didn't do that. So the closest phenotypes to him are this, followed by this, followed by this. These are all kinds of like Middle Eastern or West Asian like phenotypes, except for the last one, which is more of a Indian or alternatively maybe Hispanic phenotype. Like you see a lot of Hispanics who looks sort of vaguely like this as well. So it's not only a old world phenotype; it's also a little bit of a new world phenotype. You know, you can find people who look like this from Mexico or from like Cuba. And for the models, for the two-way models, it looks like the closest two-way model for him is a mixture of 50% this plus 50% that. All right. Okay. Yeah. I think that's where we'll end for the phenotypes. I don't want to discuss them too much. So let's go over his results, over his monogenic traits real quick. It looks like he's a warrior in Comte and warrior in MAOA. So overall, he's probably intermediate between warrior and warrior. Intermediate speed of dopamine reuptake, intermediate dopamine levels. Pretty typical, I guess. Okay, he does not have long form 5 HTTLPR, so he's got short form 5 HTTLPR. Short form 5 HTTLPR means he's a little bit predisposed to depression. But that's most people. Most people have the same short form 5 HTTLPR. Most people are a little bit predisposed to depression. Some of us, like me, for example, have the long form version of 5 HTTLPR, so we are sort of protected from depression. But in his case, he's a little bit predisposed to depression. He does not carry the European lactose persistence mutation, so there is no lactose persistence, no milk, no tolerance to milk. For the OXTR and empathy gene, I don't want to talk about it. There's just too much, and they all conflict with each other. Although most of them, 3 out of 4 of the variations that he's genotyped for, actually lead to lower levels of empathy. So I guess we could say he's more of a sociopath than an empath. For diabetes, he does not have type 1 diabetes. Really good to see. Okay, for Alzheimer's, it looks like he has some genotypes that increase the odds of Alzheimer's, like this one, for example. But most of the genotypes actually sort of decrease the odds of Alzheimer's, which is kind of really good to see. He's not a carrier for the C282Y hemochromatosis mutation. Um, Okay, for myopia panel, it looks like he does not have the G allele here, which would protect from myopia. Once again, I typically discard information about the myopia panel. I usually like brush over that and don't really talk about it. In his case, he has scored quite high for myopia, so we might be wanting to discuss this genotype because the G allele here is very European and he doesn't have it, and it leads to a much decreased odds of myopia. So in his case, he's like a typical human who does not have the G allele, who has slightly higher odds of myopia because of that. For facial morphology panel, it was just kind of interesting. I was looking up morphology variations and how they correlate with like facial features. I was reading into these studies and trying to determine how like what genotype correlates to what. So I added this higher odds of protruding nasal bridge here, nose size, and thinner or thicker eyebrows. Definitely very interesting. So he's got high odds of protruding nasal bridge, intermediate nose size, and slightly thinner eyebrows. Very cool. He actually has some genotypes in the HLA gene that predispose him to have vitiligo. Definitely very interesting. There's quite a lot of other conditions that have to do with the HLA gene, so we're gonna see what he's got for the other ones. Let's scroll past. No micropenis, really good to see. Uh, no, no East Asian genotype in EDAR, so definitely very European genotype in EDAR. No fat gene variants in FTOs RS9949609. Mix of muscle types, slightly more sprinter than an endurance athlete. And by the way, like if you have I just want to do a little bit of advertisement for my tool. If you have a 23andMe or Ancestry or MyHeritage file, you're gonna have much more content. You're gonna have much more information in your result than here because these files are quite low quality compared to commercial DNA test files. Okay, he's not a carrier of any of the albinism mutations, alright. And he's got AA genotype in this variation of MTHFR, which leads to a significant reduction in the efficiency of processing folic acid. Very, very interesting. Um, we're gonna skip cancers panel, leukemia, we're gonna skip that. Rare diseases panel. Okay, wow, that's interesting. So he's got CC here, which leads to up to 100 times increased odds of tuberculosis infection if exposed to tuberculosis bacterium, and that's a very uncommon genotype. Wow, that's kind of crazy. So some people, when they are exposed to tuberculosis bacterium, don't develop tuberculosis, whereas some people, like this individual, are like basically 100% predisposed to getting the disease if they encounter the bacterium. For Norwood scale and male pattern hair loss panel, it looks like he's got basically all the genotypes that lead to a increased risk of male pattern baldness. There's one genotype that leads to a reduced risk, but most of the genotypes he has are implicated in higher odds of male pattern baldness. All right. And for celiac disease, he actually has some risk variants for celiac disease in the HLA gene as well. The HLA gene is really important for all of these like autoimmune disorders. So it shows up a lot in these calculations and in these monogenic traits results. It's a pretty important gene. Nothing relevant for androgen receptor gene or Crohn disease panel was found. For Canavan syndrome, zero risk variants for that. All right. For HIV and AIDS panel, he does not have protective variants from HIV in this variation. All right, that's unfortunate. No risk variants for muscular dystrophy or adrenoleukodystrophy. All right. For color blindness panel, he's got one risk variant in OPN1SW out of 6, and the 2 other genes, nothing relevant was found for them. Okay. We're gonna skip all that. For the blood group panel, it looks like he actually has type A blood type. That's very interesting, right? So, type A blood type is not all that common. Um, you know, I guess to me it's uncommon because all of my friends and relatives and myself included are type O, and also type O is the most common blood type for humans. So I guess to me type A just kind of is rare, but that's what he has. He's got type A blood type. Well, thanks for watching my video until the very end. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Definitely do comment what you think about this individual scoring like Baltic and North Atlantic on GD match calculators. And also, of course, leave a like and subscribe. And by the way, you can download this file in 23andMe format from link, which is in the description of the video. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.